Good evening. Thank you all for joining us for a special edition of America in Black and White. Tonight, we're going to discuss the state of Black America. We have five expert professionals that will be with us that will be talking about and discussing and forming an agenda in which we can use to help to develop and grow our communities for a spurt that should take place within a 10-year span. Tonight we have five distinguished guests, and as we bring them onto the show, I will let everyone introduce themselves. I hope you guys have some pen and paper to take notes because this show is going to be very, very special and it's going to be full of all of the knowledge that we should be able to take back to grow and build where we live. Okay. Good evening, panel. I know it seems like some of our people are a little bit late, but I would give each of you the opportunity to introduce yourselves and say whatever you need to say about who you are and what you feel about this panel. We'll start with you, Mr. Aikens.
Hey, how you all doing? Thanks for joining us, being a part of this conversation. Dwayne Aikens, Executive Director of We Lead Ours nonprofit organization based out of Oakland. And what I'm looking to discuss with you all is more so around engaging our youth through entrepreneurial lenses and teaching them to look at their soft skills and make healthy decisions. So I'm excited to be here.
Dr. Washington.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Dr. Somone Washington. I am a software analyst with a local university, as well as the CEO of Kiasi Technology Solutions that strives to lower the digital divide for people who are of a more mature age. And what I look forward to contribute to this panel are solutions surrounding education, economics, entrepreneurship, and home ownership. Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. And Dr. Johnson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Marlon Johnson. I'm a high school teacher at Gaston County High School in Havana, Florida. I'm an author of two books, a father of three with one on the way, so that'll be four. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And my contribution is to enforce the importance of education and helping students apply education into the real world to help better our communities.
Well, I thank you all for those wonderful introductions. And I guess if, as our other two panelists come in, we will let them in on the show. Our main focus, as indicated in the beginning, is we would like to talk about education, the justice system, politics, economics, entrepreneurship, and home ownership. I would say from an educational perspective, what are some of the things that you guys feel like can change, or what we can change, not just in our communities, but from a national perspective, that can help our kids from from preschool through high school, going into college as young adults to build their lives. Let's start with you, Dr. Washington.
Well, I have two suggestions in this area. The first one is that the educational system revamp how they manage behaviors in the classroom. Traditionally, we know that the educational structure, it really has a bias towards the behaviors that girls typically have in the classroom, where you are to sit down and listen and just follow the instructions that you're given by the teacher and take good notes and pay attention. Whereas boys, in their natural way that they behave, they're more hands-on, they're more wanting to move their bodies, and they learn in a way that's more hands-on and more just not as structured as sitting down for long periods of time and listening to people speak. And so because of that is how they are, boys, and typically boys of color, are usually penalized for that behavior, which leads to them spending time in detention, the principal's office, suspensions. And as we know, that ultimately can lead to a path to prison and jail. And so my suggestion is to really take a look at how the educational system is structured, how classroom behavior is managed, and have it be more balanced so that both girls and boys can succeed and not be penalized for their natural behaviors.
So what do you think about that, Dr. Johnson?
I definitely agree. What makes me successful in my class is just human relations, meaning that when students come to my class, they know that they're going to learn more than ABCs and one, two, threes. They're going to understand that there's someone that actually cares about them and their well-being. And with me teaching high schoolers, especially freshmen who are coming from middle school or junior high, at least I can speak for my class. I've seen a complete 180 in my class. They went from being not interested and let's get this over with to, Dr. Johnson, he's cool. We're going to work hard for him. And he's motivating us to work hard for themselves. So, yes, the educational system is definitely flawed. And it had away from, our natural human elements. So I think one solution is to bring back the holistic, I don't say energy, but at least influence on the students, because I know in my class that motivates them to be successful as well. Once they know that, they are adults that care about them.
So, Mr. Aikens, in listening to both Dr. Washington and Dr. Johnson, with education being one of the main focuses for you, do you agree with that? Is there anything else you'd like to add to that could make it a whole lot better?
I agree with them. I was thinking both of those were my points, but working in schools for now since 2005, one thing that I noticed is I have a degree in psychology, minor in special ed, and so that traditional learning that I got in special ed, it actually taught me how to go in any classroom. And so I think some people get it and know how to do it, but sometimes on an elementary level, like Dr. Washington was talking about, these kids, they're learning a different way. They're exploring the world. And sometimes this happened to a lot of our single parents, to where that young son is flipping under the desk and they just exploring and they're learning how to behave eventually. And sometimes those kids get stuck on medicine, and that can have long-term effects on the kid to where they get insurance or something because their parents got them on ADHD meds and they never had ADHD. So I think in education, a great place to go would really put folks that are working with our K through 6, folks that come from special education background, early childhood development, primary education, social work. Those people should be on the campuses working on all of those different things. And then people that come with special, that should come in middle school and high school. So if you just really know mathematics and all of that good stuff, then because you don't have the traditional training, what it's like to go in the classroom in California, the CBEST are got your education. So we have in who's on CERNTIV and what they can do, because most of the people that focus specifically on math, history, English, they really want to teach like a professor. And that's when it starts coming into the middle schools and the high schools. That's it.
Okay, our other two panelists have just joined us. That's Mr. Pastor Devin Miller as well as Vaughnie Davis. You guys, we've already, when we started, what we're talking about now is education and some of the things in the systems that we think that needs to be changed, or how we feel about what is that we could do to make things a little bit better. Pastor Miller, is there anything that you would like to speak on when it comes to education in our communities and the schools?
Uh, yes, good afternoon to everyone on the panel. Grace and peace to all of you. Uh, I did hear a lot of what was said, and I guess my take on education, because I worked in education years ago with a program called Black Teens for Advancement. And one of the things that we focused on was not so much the academics as it was the community. We got to remember that the first the first teachers are the parents. And if these kids are not coming to school prepared, we are putting too much pressure on a system that is already flawed. And so we really got to go back. In our community, it was always the church that was a help in educating our kids. And because we have lost sight of the church, our community has lost sight of its foundation, and the school system is being asked to be everything instead of just being educators. So I personally don't think it's fair that for the amount of money that they pay you, they're asking you to do the world stuff. And so I think we really, as Black educators, we really have to reevaluate what is our role and how do we incorporate, once again, the community into developing our kids. Because all of us on this panel, at some point, unless you never went to church, you got some form of education from church. You learned how to be a good kid in church, not in school. And even if you had some challenges, you were taught how to embrace them, not to use them as a crutch. But we have to remember, and I'll close with this, that the parents of the kids today were born during the crack era and during a lot of stuff when our community was starting to deteriorate. And so you've got parents who are raising kids that are no older than 20, 30 years old. So there's no foundation because Big Mama is 40 or 50 years old. Okay. And Big Mama is 60. Okay. So we don't have the history of how valuable education is. And now educational institutions have become babysitting centers. And we are the ones that are going to have to change that, not the parents themselves.
So you don't think that there's a situation within the system that even though you said it was flawed, but you don't think that there's a biasness in that flaw that's actually contributing to the repression of the community and the kids learning in the schools?
Oh, of course, 100%. That's why we don't need to depend on it. We're sending our kids to school and saying, and parents are saying, I'm done. Let me go to the store. Let me go to the mall and let me do whatever until I got to go pick my kids up. Or they're on jobs that they have a lot of pressure going on the jobs. So they don't have a lot of time to pour into the children. And then you have to look at the community doesn't have community centers anymore, don't have recreational centers where you can send kids, where you can trust that they'll be safe. The church is only open on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Okay, it's not open as a continuum, as an after school center. So the community and the schools are flawed now. And somebody has to sit down and say, how do we reconstruct this in such a way that it benefits our kids? So you're sending flawed kids from a flawed community and they're going to a flawed church. So do the math. We're not going to have good kids coming out of any of those systems.
So, Mr. Davis, what is your take on the education system, and how can we make this a whole lot better?
I pretty much agree with everything I've heard so far on the panel, and trying to implement some different practices into the school system is one of the things that we're working on down here in Mobile, Alabama. We're trying to put male mentors on campus where we'll have what says Pastor Miller was just speaking on the discipline that the teachers are having to try to implement with our kids. It's not without cause as well. You got to think about, we have laws that's in effect that hinders some parents from being able to discipline their children the proper way without worrying about if they're going to go to jail or they're going to have DHR show up at their home. And I'm actually dealing with a case like that now where a 9-year-old child went to school and made false accusations against her mother and stepfather, and now the DHR are in their business because she went to school and the school is upholding certain standards for what they're telling our kids the rights they have. Of course, we know that the kids have rights. We're not taking rights from them, but it's certain things as far as certain rights that they don't have being kids. They're not responsible enough to be able to make decisions on what they're going to do and what they want to do. So that's one of the things and one of the problems we have in the school system as well when we're dealing with the at-risk youth, the kids that have disciplinary issues, that are known disciplinary issues. Of course, they have some things in place for that, but I have seen and did a case study with a group of kids here in Mobile where I took and put them in a class setting of their liking, where they were able to excel in what they wanted to do. I had the kids that were able to go into the science class. I had kids who were able to go into a math class. I had kids that went into language arts. Some of the kids didn't want to partake in the language arts. So I said, fine. I left them in science. And what I learned about that kid being able to stay in that science course or that class, he stayed more focused throughout the day. He didn't have any issues where he had tantrums or just got upset and wanted to fight. He got discouraged. At no point did I witness that with any of the kids when they were able to stay in a setting. So I talked with one of the superintendents over a middle school here, and I was asking them if it was possible that we could implement that instead of retract, we could have some kind of way that we could put those at-risk kids in classes that they're comfortable in. And when they're ready to transition into other classes and then go take math, which we know that they need that. It's very important that they learn math skills. But at a point, we can say, okay, we can pull him from his math class because he's always acting out in math. We can go back to that. We got 13 years worth of schooling that this kid is going to have to partake in. Eventually, he's going to want to go over there on his own. So I'm thinking if we can find a way to implement a curriculum to the schools where we just allow our kids to go where they're comfortable at, and they can we'll find our next scientist that way. We'll find our next astronaut that way because that kid can start on a project in science, say in the first grade, and he just stay in that place and he continues to work on that same project all the way to sixth grade. Then he want to take math, but you will be able to see something from that kid which is really inside of him. They're taking our gifts away from us by putting us in these school settings. Like, I'm not against the school at all, but I do know that the school programs us to a certain tune where we get away from where we are our best at. And that's one of the reasons where the kids get the ADHD kicks in for them, where they not focusing and they're not paying attention. They don't even like that subject. Then we fail them in that subject. Once they fail, then that's even more discouraging. Like, I failed in something I don't like. I'm being forced to go in here. Okay, that's a decision that a kid should be able to make. Not saying, I'm gonna eat chocolate and I don't want dinner today. And then when the parent discipline them, the kid can go back to school and have the authorities in your place. So those are just some of the things that we've worked with and seen here in Mobile with the at-risk youth that I deal with. I'm a community facilitator, and that's pretty much what we do. We deal with the at-risk youth and the gunshot victims, and we also go into the schools and deal with the troubled teens. And we also try to find ways to, like, we partner with big brothers and sisters. We have outsourced other community partners that are willing to take them in and say, okay, if you have a kid that's acting out or he's not being teachable, we'll put someone and partner them with a big brother or a big sister that they can be comfortable with and they can share their life with. And these people, they stay in tune with the kids and they stay up to part on, what they're doing in school, with their mental health, with things going on at home. So that's like a third party person that's implemented. And so we just have to, with inside of the school, we have to partner with other community partners and organizations that are willing to come in and help in that matter. Just like I was saying with putting the mentors on campus, the men mentors on campus, that'll be vital to the discipline for the kids, because they always come out of class and they see these men. We don't have many men as teachers. So if we can just get men up there, I think that would help great.
Well, let me just say this, because and this is two-pronged, because I think everything that has been said so far is more than just fruitful. But I mean, what do you guys think about, in just certain segments of our communities in the beginning? If we can just start to shape those communities, and we build our own schools, because I think if our kids are going to actually have the opportunity, I think, to thrive in this world today, they're going to have to learn a whole lot more about our culture, as well as these other things that need to be learned about these other folk as well. So, but my main point about that is, if we built our schools, let's say we came up with our own charter schools, and we can make them grades 1 through 12, and we have the right teachers that that's got the right credentials in order to teach these classes, and can actually help these kids from grades 1 through 12. Do you think that that's something that we should be able to invest in? Let's start with you, Mr. Aikens. Mr. Aikens? Hello?
Yeah.
Dr. Washington?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. I was asking you, what is your take on the suggestion?
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Well, I think it's doable, but I think it's a collaborative plan. A collaborative plan approach. I think you do need public schools infrastructure and processes where you can actually support some of those learning behaviors and stuff because of the funding. I think that in a good place would, if you had this perfect school district, or say you have elementary that's focused all around like some of those early childhood development folks, psychologists, therapists, all that people there. 5th grade, they take a career assessment and a life skills test to kind of see action they want to go in. Then when they get to middle school, since charters tend to have like these unique focus, it's saying that you should be in math and science, you should be in law or something like that. You can have middle school set up with charter on those campuses that focus directly on those issues, because once some things that happen is sometimes charter schools don't do that English piece correctly, or some mandate by the state. So they pick kids that are really brilliant academically, and they lead out a whole group of kids that should be going to some of those pipeline programs. High schools, you can take it to where you have a high school set up, and say you have academies or magnet schools within academies. The regular public school infrastructure can take care of all the social welfare, the classes before they loop interact with networks, to run certain academies in the high schools, instead of having all of these folks competing on public school campuses, especially in urban neighborhoods, where you got in some school districts, you got on the same campus, you got a charter school and a public school with the same grade level, and these kids from the same neighborhood, and then charter come with a stigma behind it, like we're better than the public school. So you have kids from the same economic status, same block, beefing with each other on school campus and living with each other in the neighborhood. So we got to be creative about how we solve the problem and what we're selling and what we're promoting for our kids.
Dr. Washington, what you think about that?
I agree with both suggestions, and to the point where I would agree, especially with the cultural point that you made. I think what would be helpful is to mandate that cultural history in elementary school, middle school, and high school, in a similar way that a bill has just been passed in the state of California last year, where it's a requirement that all freshmen are required to take a cultural class to learn about Black American history. I think that should be a requirement K through 12. I know that there are some states that are fighting that right now, but I think the importance, especially to our children, to learn their history will empower them to understand like they come from a lineage of people who invented the math and the sciences and who have invented a lot of the things that we're learning in school, and understanding that you come from the lineage that created these things will give a foundational incentive and encouragement and curiosity to learn these things. And I believe that our our kids will have a different perspective on school and the subjects if they knew that foundationally. Um, and I do agree with what Mr. Aikens is saying about restructuring the system to better fit what our kids would benefit from.
Well, I understand that because I think what Mr. Aikens is saying is very fruitful. But I mean, when I say the charter system, I'm not saying use the one that's already in place. I'm talking about one that's separate from the other things. And
I think
so,
I think that another approach would be to do both at the same time. I don't think that we have to choose one way or the other. I think that we can be using both approaches at the same time. We could be some of our people could be working to restructure the system that's already in place in the ways that Mr. Aikens and I are saying. At the same time, another group of community leaders would be structuring a new system just for our Black and Brown students. I think we can do both at the same time.
Dr. Johnson, what is your opinion?
My opinion in terms of charter schools, I'm more in the favor of us starting our schools that are independent of charter schools. And the reason being is that with a charter school, is that we're still under the jurisdiction of the same flawed system that is not really helping our children within the school. Um, with us starting our own schools, we can be able to start our own curriculums. We can create our own expectations. With students with behavior issues, we can definitely come up with expectations that can help enrich, their growth and their learning. As I mentioned earlier, once a student knows that we care about them, the rest is history. So I'm more along the lines of let's create our own independent schools instead of starting with a charter school, because again, if we're receiving money from an outside source, they're still going to dictate how we teach our kids or how we service our kids or how we help our communities. So I'm more on the independent front, but I think I do agree with everybody on the panel.
Pastor Miller, I know that you're all about the community and especially when it comes to the church. When you hear the proposed situation that I just brought up, does that sound like anything that you feel could fit within the community, or let's just say your community?
Not at the present time. I think I probably got about 20 years on the panel, and at 58 years old. Does anybody on the panel remember Brown versus the Board of Education?
That was Thurgood Marshall's.
And do you understand that the purpose of that was to try to create an equal system?
Right.
But the reality was that we had to close our schools and we had to integrate into their schools.
Right.
So
Ain't nothing changed. Ain't nothing changed since that time.
Right.
We have to understand that the school system right now is a prison pipeline for Black and brown kids. And so to Dr. Johnson's point, we need to create our own, but we first got to re-educate our community to the value of education. Right now, all our kids want to be content creators. All our kids want to live on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and make a name for themselves because that's all they see. because the generation before them used the television and used the internet as entertainment because they didn't know how to educate their own kids. So we have to sit down with our community and reevaluate what's important before we talk about changing systems, because the system is set up for us to fail.
There we go.
It's not, it doesn't want to change. And I don't care how many black people you put in the system, they're going to be indoctrinated to the system.
Right.
And at some point, their check is going to be more important than their heart. So you got to hold. I mean, I appreciate where y'all at, but I'm coming from where we've been. And I've seen the evolution, and kids have been dummied down since the 90s. There's no value in education right now.
Right.
And because there's no value in education from their parents, and there's no value in education from their parents, we're talking about 2 or 3 generations. So if we're going to move forward, we have to tear up the foundation. We don't have to build another layer on something that's already crumbling. And that is from what Dr. Washington was saying, was a sense of self. Back in the 60s, when we were in segregation, we couldn't depend on anybody else but us. Now we're depending on everybody else but us. And us who look like us don't really believe in us. You'll figure that out after the broadcast. So we've got a lot of issues that we got to deal with as a community before we go to these systems and start trying to demand change.
Right.
Because we're sending kids in there that don't have a foundation in who they are. And look, there's no way that I want this system to teach me about who I am, because they're going to skew it to a certain way that I'd be conditioned to think like them. And so we got to be very, very careful and really look at where we are. I look at what Brother Davis was saying. We had a program real quick. We had a pull-out program. This was in the 90s. We had a pull-out program where we pulled the kids out and we taught them their history with nobody else around. It was me and the African-American kids, because we didn't want it to be tainted by anybody else. And we had to give them a sense of pride and give them a sense of who they were, give them a sense of who they were. And for those who were having disciplinary issues, if they were sent to the Alternative Learning Center or they were sent to alternative schools, we went in there and we did the same thing. Because the only reason they're acting out is because they have no sense of self. And they don't know who they are, and they're picking up straws from everybody else. We have to re-educate this generation. The Gen X's, Gen Z's, Gen A's, whatever they are, the millennials, whoever, they don't have a sense of who Malcolm is. They don't have a sense of who Martin is. They don't have a sense of Frederick Douglass. They look at them as names in a book. But it's up to my generation's at fault. I'll take ownership. We were at fault because we wanted our kids to be better than what we had. But what we forgot was the foundation that we had is what made it better. It wasn't living in a better neighborhood, buying the best clothes, going to a suburban school. I went through all of that in the 70s. I went to a predominantly white school, but I didn't go in there looking to find my identity. I knew who I was going in. And they had to adjust. Not that I was militant, but I had a sense of self. Because I started in an all-black school with black teachers that cared about who we were in my formative years. So by the time I got to junior high, I didn't need a school to tell me who they were. I already knew. So when they were saying something wrong, I could correct them. Oh no, that's not what Martin did. Oh no, that wasn't what Malcolm. You ain't even talking about Malcolm. See, that's the empowerment that we have to give our kids now, because everything else is crumbling. There's a generation right now that only look at Martin Luther King holiday as a holiday. They're not giving back. They're not volunteering. They're not looking at the messages of Martin. Why? Because they're not taught. And that's the role of the community and the role of the church. And when you got problems in the church and you got problems in the community, you have chaos. And that's what we have. So those who have the vision and the intestinal fortitude to really put in the work, that's a remnant. We call that in the church a remnant. It ain't everybody. They spent 40 years in the wilderness to get rid of a certain amount of people before they went to the promised land. That's where we are right now. 40 years in the wilderness. We got to let some people die off and bring some new people in and teach them the right way according to what's going to sustain us for the long haul.
What's your opinion, Mr. Davis?
First, I want to thank you, Pastor. You hit on some very strong subjects and topics just then. Uh, but as far as the schools, me, my mindset is on the schools is really like I was saying earlier, we have to implement our own things with our kids. Conflict resolution is one of the things I feel they need to make mandatory in the schools, in elementary. Conflict resolution, start teaching them conflict resolution, put it in as like I said, a mandatory subject for them to study. That way they can learn how to communicate through their issues versus resulting to violence at any point, even if it's not being taught in a household, or if they in one of those communities where it's just straight violence and drugs being sold and prostitution going on, because we have those type of communities. And like he said, the remnant is one or two. Many are called, but few are chosen. So when we have the understanding as leaders, community leaders, or whatever other kind of leader we may be, we have to take that step up and stand in the gap for the parents, for the families and households that may have a absent mother and a drugged out father or a dead father, because we're losing our men at a phenomenal rate. I know in Mobile for sure, and I know that what's going on here is not just here; it's going on all around this country. Gun violence is at an all-time high. That's like what I deal with day in and day out. I'm in and out of the emergency room looking at our youth getting shot and killed, or just a wide range of it. But conflict resolution, I feel, should be inside of the schools, along with the male mentors. I feel like we need to create our own school system where it's optional for our kids or other families and parents that want to be able to put their kids into a public school of our own choosing, versus because I live in this area and these are the only schools that are available for me to be able to have to integrate into these places. Uh, the system is, like he said, the system is set up for us to fail. I was talking to a friend of mine today, and I'm conscious to have it on my tongue because this is what I do. This is all I talk about, things of this nature. But I told him, I said, man, the system is working just fine for those who created the system. Everybody talking about the system broke and is this and that. Oh, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. It's working perfectly. And the reason it's working perfect for those who created it, because it's doing exactly what they wanted it to do. Create failure for the less fortunate, the people, the colored people. I'm gonna just be straight up about it. We own America in black and white, the black folks, us, our own people. You know what I'm saying? So we have to fight harder and harder and harder to just go against all the cards that stacked against us, and knowing that we're working with a few people that's willing to step up and fight against these things, because it's not easy to stand on business when it comes down to saying I'm finna speak up today. We see it through celebrities. Don't think it don't happen down here on the grassroots level. You get out there and you get to talking about something going wrong, you'll find yourself pulled over every time you look around. And you wonder what's going on. Your children getting pulled over. Well, nowadays we go got to fight the system. So we have to be careful. It ain't all that stuff hasn't went away. What they were doing to Martin Luther King and those guys who were in the background that we never heard of. They were going through things because they were strong enough and they stepped up and they spoke up against the injustices that's going on, against the system that was set up to make us fail. So we got to go overtime with this thing as far as get out in our community and get our peers to get on board and say, okay, enough is enough. I'm gonna be willing to stand in this gap with you for a common cause. I have through my organization, White Flag Movement 65 in the Hood, through my organization, I have Christians, Muslims, atheists, Jehovah Witnesses, and they all get along. They don't argue and fight and bicker and fuss about their religion, which is what separates us most of the time. It's religion. We can't get along. We can't come together for a common cause because we allow those things that are put in place to separate us to do just what it's put in place to do. So we got to fight against those things and come together and get out into the community and make the community understand that we can't wait on outside forces and entities to come inside of here and clean up the stuff that we messed up. We can't work or wait on them to come in and fix something that we broke. We got to step up and handle that business for ourselves. Until we step up and handle that business on our own, it's not gonna happen.
Let me say this. And I understand. Pastor Miller made some really good points. Now, we all know that the system, for one, is stacked against us. We all know that. We all know too that not everybody is going to have the best foundation, but we all must be accountable. And accountability is step one in my book. And so, there's going to be other opinions on that. And so my thing is this. When we just think about this from a broad perspective, is it safe to say that segregation has a lot to do with the destruction of the educational system for us? And if so, how is it that we're not able to go back into our communities, to take the communities back, make them strong, and take charge like was once done, let's say like with what's the organization that was there, the Black Panthers? How they took charge of their communities, and they never let some of the things happen that was supposed to happen, but because they controlled the communities, it took the federal government to come in and to do all kind of disruption, to take over and to totally destroy our communities once again. My thing is, do you think segregation has a lot to do with this? And it played a lot in how people learn and how the education system worked. What do you think about that, Dr. Johnson?
I think you mean integration, not segregation.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, integration, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No worries. I just want to make sure we're talking right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the books I read was a book called Disintegration. And in that book, it mentioned how we were conditioned to give without asking anything into return. And I remember in our previous conversation, Mr. King, you once asked, how come we don't have a Black Wall Street? And I mentioned to you is that we as a people, we don't want it bad enough. And we don't want it bad enough because our priorities are all wrong, because we were indoctrinated into a system that was alien to us while being robbed of our indigenous history and culture. So accountability, as you mentioned, is job one. We have to take responsibility. Yes, segregation was the cause of all this. Because as I mentioned before, race has two definitions. One is a commonality, like the human race, and the other one is a competition, i.e. racism. So yes, we can argue that segregation played a role in it, but you can also say that segregation also helped us, because when we was just us, and again, I wasn't there at the time, so I can't say for a fact, but from what I studied, when it was a situation where we were all we were, or all we got, as the kids would say, we did a pretty good job of building our own cities, building our own Black Wall Streets, inventing things and things of that nature. And of course, as you mentioned, Mr. King, the government and of course the oppositional structure was the ones that pretty much negated us and took that all away. So so segregation can be responsible for the cause, but the effects is up to us. We have to make a decision now, as mentioned earlier, to come together back in our communities, whether it be the church, whether it be schools, whether it is at home or community centers or any place of safe refuge. And as one of my students said earlier today, hit a hard reset button and recalibrate ourselves, get back to gaining knowledge of self that will get us back to where we need to go. So I'm not saying I'm advocating for segregation, but I am advocating for our people to get back on one accord. Just like the Latin community, they're on one accord. The white community, they're on one accord, for example. And I think that it just comes back to priorities and re-educating ourselves from the miseducation.
Dr. Washington?
I agree with Dr. Johnson. I also agree with having our own schools and having our own structures. But this panel is about solutions that we can implement over the next 10 years. And the truth of the matter is, if we were to pull out all of our Black kids from the system that we currently have, we do not have a system in place to put them in. So we have to work with both systems at the same time. So we have to work within the system that we have to improve it, to better have a better outcome for our students, as well as build the structure for them, for us to have our own structure for them to go into. All of it is gradual. Nothing of it is going to happen overnight. But we all have to be on the same page about it. And the reason why we don't have a Black Panther or we don't have a system in place to help our Black students and Black people just have that foundational self awareness and our history is because we are not all on the same page about that being the priority of what we want to teach our kids. Like, we don't have to beg the school system to teach our kids of who they are. That's on us to do, and nothing is stopping us from doing that. But we, as a community, as parents, as teachers, as the church, as our community efforts are not on the same page that is the priority, that we all take accountability and have a part in making sure our kids know who they are and making sure they know their history. That's something that we can do today. That's something that all of us can play a part in. Parents can be transparent with their kids, even if they are younger parents. They have still experienced racism. They have still experienced microaggressions. They have still experienced discriminations on things that they were trying to do to better themselves and better the situation for their families. Parents need to be more transparent with their kids about sharing these experiences with them, how they've addressed them, and teaching them about our history. So to empower them and embolden them to be better and to make them aware of the things that are to come, because we're still in the system and they're going to experience the same things. But how do you deal with it? And how do you have that self-confidence to self-advocate? Instead of, for whatever reason, I believe parents feel like they have to present this persona of being perfect or having everything together so that they can be good parents to their kids. And to a certain extent, that is true. But when it comes to teaching our kids our history and teaching us about like what it is, real life, to be a Black person in America, like that needs to be shared as well. There needs to be a level of vulnerability and transparency in the conversations that we have with our kids about our experiences and how that can help them learn and be prepared for the experiences that they're about to have. Our churches, our community, we can teach our kids the history that we want them to know of who they are and where they came from. There's nothing stopping us from teaching our kids that. So we just got to get on the same page that is going to be a priority for us to do as an entire community, from the different aspects of being parents, role models, teachers, community leaders, church leaders. If we're all saying we're doing that, then the kids will be bombarded at every place that they go to learn a little something about their history, or for somebody to say something positive to them. Whenever they go to the corner store or whenever they go walking down the street, somebody could yell it out at in from a car that they're passing by to say something. Like, we can, nothing is stopping us from imparting those things in our kids right now today.
Mr. Aikens.
When you come off mute. Off mute. Did it come off mute? Trying to get off.
Okay, I can hear you. We'll come back to you, Mr. Aikens. Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I agree with Miss Washington as far as we're gonna have to work together and partner with these different people. And I honestly do feel that because it's gonna take more than one direction to address the issues that we're facing, not just with the schools, but as a whole, as a people. You get what I'm saying? And it's not as easy as said. It's easier said than done as far as us teaching our kids, because you got to think a lot of the parents don't even have the awareness to know that they need to teach their kids about history, about our history. It's like it doesn't even matter to a lot of people. I see this, like I said, and I'm going off of my personal experiences throughout my city, with dealing with people on this level, like their attention to it and what they care about. I mean, politics, schools, the issues that really matter to us, the things that we sitting out here and we fight against from on so many different fronts, because they're just not aware. The awareness is not there, and that's one of our campaigns that we're pushing down here, is spreading awareness about the law, spreading awareness about the things going on, trying to educate the kids and the parents about our true history of who we are. That was one of the things we implemented through my organization. They started a couple of my people wanted to pursue Hey Rule and the Kemetic teaching, to teach our kids about ourselves through ancient Kemet. And I was fine with it, and I allowed them to roll out their plan, and they started doing it. Like, we got to love ourselves, we got to know ourselves, and I was in total agreement with that, because they was like, it was one of the root things that would help us stop harming one another once you love yourself and you love your brother. And it was like that Martin Luther King's agape love that we were trying to show throughout the community, jumping from community to community, with events and with just trying to spread the awareness. Like, we got to put the guns down and stop harming each other, so we can reconstruct the communities for the children, for them to come through and not have to face the same stereotypes and profiles that we as adults have went through with the system, as far as racism and all kind of discrimination and things of that nature. We have to be able to teach our kids on multiple levels on how to conduct themselves to get along with not just our own people, but with the system, with the church. And so it's gonna take so many different organizations and people. We're gonna have to come with the school. We're gonna have to get with social workers. We're gonna have to get with mental health counselors, and everybody's gonna have to get involved to try to attack what we're dealing with just the school system and our kids being able to get back on track as a people and go a different direction from where we're going.
All right, Pastor Miller, what's your stake in this?
Well, I agree with what Dr. Washington is saying. And when you look at the fact that if we were looking at a 10-year plan, we start now. And we start pulling together those people who have a commitment beyond their paycheck, and will have a commitment to our community and commitment to our children. When I was really active in my work in Minnesota, we had a pin that we gave out to everybody that says, "So how are the children?" And everybody in the community wore that pin. So we knew whatever we were doing, garbage collector, lawyer, whatever, your main focus in our community was, how are the children? So that's number one. The second thing is, to Brother Davis and Brother Johnson's point, we have everything in our community now that we need in order to change the trajectory in the next 10 years. We have lawyers, we have doctors, we have social workers, we have everything in our community. We even have financial resources. The question is, are we willing to look beyond ourselves and talk about what's going on with the next 10 years? And so my proposal has always been, we need to have a national focus, and then that national focus has to then permeate itself within the cities throughout the country. And the first thing we need to do is have a come to Jesus meeting. We need to sit with each other and tell each other about each other and really find out who's in this fight to win or who is in this fight to get another check. Because we got poverty pimps, we got church pimps, we got educational pimps. And if we, those of us who look beyond that and know what they look like, don't get in there and say, no, brother, we love you, but you can't be a part of this.
Exactly right.
No, brother, I like what you're doing, but no, you on another page. You come when the train get further down the track, we'll call you again and see if you're ready to do what needs to be done. See, that's the intestinal fortitude that we need in order to reset our communities, as Dr. Johnson said, and what Dr. Washington said. But do we have that desire? I'm 58 years old. I don't see anybody jumping up. I appreciate the individualism, but there's not a collective thought. And that's where we have to start, because if we don't have a collective thought, it only takes one person to mess it up and run back to the other folks and say, you know what they doing over there?
Yes, sir.
You know what we called them? We called them the house. Put the other part on there.
Yes, sir.
This is the field. Put the other name on there.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of us who are in the field know what needs to be done, but the house folks keep putting up the roadblocks that look like us.
Those are the gatekeepers.
Not only the gatekeepers, they're the gate builders. They build the gate to keep. And so what we tried, and I'll be quiet. When I was doing stuff in St. Paul Public Schools, the superintendent, who happened to be Black, would have this meeting called 15 minutes with the superintendent. Now, what you going to be able to talk to a superintendent about in 15 minutes? But I did it. And everybody was on there, well, this and that. I said, let me tell you what's going on. I said, I only got 15 minutes, and let me tell you what's going on. Central High School is going to implode. Highland Park High School is going to explode. Johnson High School is going to do a combination of the two, and then Como don't even know what's going on. And the superintendent looked at me like, wait a minute, what's going on? I said, I only got 15 minutes. You only gave me 15 minutes. I already used 12. So here's the thing. If you don't look into your schools and really see what's going on, you are going to have a massive walkout of all the Black students, and then you're going to have to be forced to do something about it. And the reason we said that was because we had something in place where all the churches would take all the kids and educate them through retired teachers and say, we're going to keep you educated, but we're not going to send you back to that system until that system comes to us and asks us, what must I do to be saved? And we had a plan already in place from former educators, former superintendents, former whatever, because that's where the history is. That's where the information is those who came out of the system because of whatever. We go to them and we say, why did you get out when you were in? Well, it's because this. Okay, what do we need to change? That, and that. Okay, put it in place. And then you go to the system and you speak truth to power. Because at the end of the day, those kids have a dollar sign.
Right.
And when you pull the money, you make change.
Yes, sir. Mr. Aikens, are you back with us? Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Learning a little bit about this restream, so I have to get on the Apple device. I wasn't on the Apple device, so that's why.
So your opinion.
But yeah, and I heard a lot of great things that I agree with, but collaboration and then dealing with where we are, what we have access to now, and what we're working with, and just being very realistic about what's actually going on. I do think that we can do both things at the same time. And I agree with a little disruption is necessary in order to bring change about. And just thinking about some of the things that I heard, and just thinking about when I first started careers in education, people don't recognize that, especially in public schools, a lot of parents don't recognize that you are the customer. And so when you go to, if you have a bad day at a restaurant, you go complain, you go make some noise, you probably try to get somebody fired. Our parents don't do the same level of advocacy at the schools. And so and when the parents don't push into those classrooms, I feel like they can come into those classrooms and be a part of where they're leaving their kids at. A lot of mismanagement happens. And one thing that I noticed in the school, a couple of the school districts that I visited, are that it's also a cry for help for a lot of our black girls that are on these campuses, especially when it's not a lot of representation from people that look like us that are on these school sites, and they're treated a certain way. And what that does, they start believing in these negative stereotypes, and they believe that, oh, I'm supposed to get in fights, I'm supposed to be catty, I'm supposed to be going on the bad girls club and auditioning and all these different things, and they start carrying themselves like that on campus. And we also see the same thing when it comes to our black boys. The same thing, like they were talking about earlier, not feeling loved and not feeling like things that they're supposed to be in these spaces. And so we do have to start teaching our kids at home the value of self, that you have to be strong enough to love you, to know who you are, so that you can be your best self and you can do anything that you want to do. For example, even though my mom was on drugs when I was growing up, my mom used to always tell me, Dwayne, one day, and this is when I really love science, one day you're going to be an astronaut, you're going to be a doctor. She would tell me things like that. I always had breakfast, lunch, dinner. I didn't go without things. So she used to always tell me these things like you're going to do well. You can do anything that you want to do. My grandmother, she would always be like, well, if you want to go to that camp, don't worry about the money. I'll figure out how to make sure you can get to these camps and get to these places so that you can be your best self. And I remember when I was in college at Xavier and I was having a rough time. That was the first time I didn't get above a 3.0 was my and, and so I was kind of like, I'm coming back home and going to San Jose State and you need my help anyway. And she was like, no, you're not. You're not allowed to come back from New Orleans until you have a college degree. So she held me accountable to make sure that I was not going to drop out of school and come back to Oakland because I had one disappointed semester. And so that's all true. I was telling somebody I remember getting spankings in the back of the church, and sometimes going to the pastor office with my grandmother and getting a spanking for cutting up in church. And I too developed my reading skills from going to church with my great grandmother in Fresno. I was a horrible reader up until about the start of the fourth grade. But she made me read that Bible. She made me learn those scriptures. And when I got back to Oakland, I was reading on my grade level. And that also showed me a lot of my confidence in self, and probably why I like to speak on podcasts and do public speaking things and stuff like that. And those Easter Sundays, it was on and popping after that. I was winning all the money at church. I was getting all the money for those for those scripture readings. But it definitely started at church. It definitely started at home, and figuring out how do we restore some of that old school traditional stuff. You have people that walk past each other, don't even communicate, but we are operating through an individual lens, and that's a learned behavior. And we've lost a lot of our cultural connectivity and the things that we value. And lastly, I always joke like it's almost like after we lost Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and then we received the voter rights stuff, and we got all these wins for everybody. Board versus education, we get all these wins, but we lose a lot of our leaders, and it's kind of like some of our people that was on the come up, that was a part of the leadership, that was supposed to keep the energy going. They collected their check and said, okay, well, forget it, I'm gonna quit, and I'm gonna deal with the status quo. And that's when we stop being excellent. And you see people that are not from here coming here and they working through a collaborative. They all move into one house, stack up some money, build a business, move somebody out, move somebody in, and then next thing you know, our neighborhoods no longer look like they looked when I was growing up. And you like, I don't know nobody in this neighborhood. right? So we have to, it's a lot of work that we have to do. Those of us that are in leadership roles, we also have to be humble to realize that I come with everybody on this panel come with a certain skill set. So if we was gonna do business, each person tell me what are your three main points. So we'll do a succession plan. Okay, now we look at the commonalities. Okay, and these things is just individual things. So we'll look at the commonalities first, where we all got in common, and we'll put these other things on future phase plans to where we can work in and get those things in, right? So if all the leaders feel like, yeah, we are eating together, I feel like I'm a part of this and not just here, then everybody will take it seriously and work through that succession plan. But I definitely think starting our own individual schools is a great idea. I encourage folks to start thinking about that because we have to make sure, those of us that are in education, we have to make sure that we're developing tools to which we can still have a job throughout all of this AI infrastructure change. We have to know how to evolve with the technology and be a part of the global changing economy, looking at what's going on.
Uh-oh. We just dropped Mr. Aikens. Well, we're going to move on to another topic, which is economics. Now we know that economics in the Black community, we know what that's like. We know what things look like, and we know that resource-wise, it's just not there. But so economics though is it's like it's many things that goes into that makes up the whole thing. But the thing that we can always say, and that I've always noticed, especially about economics in my community, is that we were always short on resources. The thing that was the best outlet that we had was the ability to go to the recreation center. So if you go to the recreation center, you get to do everything that you want to do. You're playing, you're having fun, but when you wanted to have when you need that grocery store in your area, you never really had a real grocery store. You would always have to run to the corner store, but if you want to go to the grocery store, you got to go at least 15, 20 miles outside your neighborhood.
Mhm.
If you wanted to go and do some real serious shopping, there was never no shopping outlets there. You had to go a ways off to go shop, for retail outlets and stuff like that. Economics in our community, with the way the system is set up, is that you have to depend on these other businesses in order to get the things that you want. So they're outside your community where they can charge these crazy, crazy prices, that you can't afford, but if you want it, you just pay for it. The economics that the way it looks now, the Urban League just put out their state of Black America, and when they were talking about economics, they're talking about that the jobs in the Black communities, the jobs have. I mean, there's been some increased numbers in employment, but in our community, it's still on the low end compared to other ethnicities. So therefore, there's still no generational wealth, which we all understand that. There's also a lack of entrepreneurship. There's also a lack of home ownership, and there's also the lack of just being able to put money aside to save for the rainy day. Now, when it comes to economics, I've always thought about, if I was going to do something, what I would think about is building our communities one at a time. And so that means that we've got to have, as Pastor Miller was saying earlier, we got to have the people that's willing to put in that time to help build those communities. So my question to you all is, when it comes to economics, And we're talking about we want to have this generational wealth. We want to have home ownership. We want to have entrepreneurship. We want to have the abilities to basically do the things we want to do when we need to do them. What is your suggestion in building up the community, and how do we start from steps 1 to 5? Pastor Miller.
Well, I think the first thing is education.
Okay.
We have to reteach our communities that it's not just about the dollar, it's about wealth. There's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. Because wealthy has multiple tentacles to it. You know, it's your spiritual health, your mental health, wealth, health and wealth. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, again, we have enough financial planners, realtors, all of that in our various communities that can help educate how to do home ownership, how to do to build a portfolio and things like that on little of nothing. See, we have to stop comparing ourselves. That's what integration did. It made us compare ourselves. Wealth to us is not wealth to them. And so we have to understand the difference of what's wealthy to us. It's not about how much you amass, it's how much you grow. And so we have to teach, what are we building wealth for? Are we building wealth to have an image, to let everybody know externally what we got? Or do we take a page from our other cultural brothers and sisters and say, you ain't got to have the first, the latest, the greatest, and the finest? If you got you don't need an Apple 15 if Apple 14 is still working. You don't have to have that. Put that money you would put in an Apple 15, 16, 17 and put it in something that will build money for you. It's changing our mentality from this microwave, gotta have it now, to I can sacrifice and sustain now to have it later. And when we start looking at it from that perspective, then we'll see our communities change. Because again, social media and the internet is dictating how we act in our community. That's why, as I heard before, because I had some people working on my house, we have our kids going in thinking they got to do this mob stuff or they got to do all of this. Why? So somebody can have a phone and record it and load it up on TikTok, Snapchat, and all of that and get clicks and likes. And we've got to change that mentality. We can't do nothing until we change the mentality of trying to either keep up with or be like or have as much as the other person. It's all about self and being appreciative of yourself so that when you see somebody that looks like you appreciate them as well.
So what are your other steps? 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Well, 1 is education. 2 is C number 1. 3 is C number. It's all about education. Mm-hmm. We just got to get in a room and let me say this. 1 is education. 2 is collaboration. 3 is information, again, based on education. 4 is practice. Because once we teach and once we show how to do it, then we have to have a place where they can put it to practice. And then we have to reevaluate number 4. And then once we've done all that, then we put a plan together and we implement number 5.
Mr. Davis.
Well, I agree with me as far as education, but it's what type of education. We got to start implementing trades and skills into these schools as well. I mean, we got to start teaching our kids how to make the money. We're going to educate them. We need to educate them on life skills. Out of the stuff that's taught in school, okay, it's good, it's cool, but is it going to teach them how to survive in life? Is it going to teach them how to build a house? Is it going? I mean, once you get to college, yeah, you can take a trade and get you or something at that point. But when they're 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, very impressionable, then we got to start implementing some type of education on our own. You got to think about it. The parks are always open during football and basketball season. Money is available then because these parents have to pay for football equipment for the child. They have to continue to fund the football team. So when you think about these coaches want to get out here and they want to play boys football, in order to play football or to have a football team at this park, you need to be implementing something to these children that you have control of, and you're doing it. This is one of the most impressive to take. They should take of those opportunities when you're at which you got 30 and 40 kids present and some of their parents, and you implement the trade at your practice. You implement the skill at your practice, you know, and also when you think about it, economically we're better because of a lot of us, a lot of people have better. So when you think about these guys, they get out of after they lose to society. Now they got to go through the stigma of a background and they can't get a job. So now, if you can't get a job, you can't provide your family household. If that man is not functioning or the woman is not functioning properly or living. So when you can't find what you have to do, you go to any means of survival and do what it takes to go up out of that situation. So we got to ways to come back and go against what the norm is and talk to our councilmen that's in place about these things that are holding up our family. Because I'm quite sure each and every one of us are friends incarcerated. Probably went through a tough time started. So, in order to take statistics show that these guys are committing another crime and recidivism is continuously the revolving door is there because these guys they come home, there's nothing in place for them, and also with their kids, they don't have nowhere to go after school. We was talking about boys and girls clubs a little earlier. Somebody mentioned about we not having those accessible the way we did as when we were youth. We're trying to work on that here, but that needs to be implemented everywhere. We need to have safe houses in our communities that stock with food and clothing for people when they're just coming through. We don't need to just be able to go to the Goodwill or the inner city mission. We need to be able to put these safe houses in our community where people can come over there and get by until they can see their next check or whatever it is to feed their family this afternoon versus this guy can't feed his family, he go commit a crime because he's trying to take some food back home. That will change a lot of our problems. We got to create jobs, more jobs. I know jobs are coming, but here in Alabama, every piece of money that they sending this way, over half of it going to a prison. If they get $20 million today, they're gonna spend 10 million of it on a prison. You get what I'm saying? And then they're gonna take the other five and put it into the roads. And then they ain't gonna even think about the people who's sleeping on them roads. You get what I mean? We still got people up under this bridge when you could have taken that money and put it into some of these different facilities that can house these people. Or like I said, create a safe house, create an apartment complex that's outside of the norm inner city mission, Goodwill, or jail that people can turn to when they're going through that situation. And inside these safe houses, they got to be resources there where this person can go out and get a job. This person can find some mental health treatment for themselves because a lot of people are suffering from trauma. So we got to find ways to implement those things alone will help a person overcome their financial situation, become more economically involved with participation.
Dr. Washington, what's your opinion?
I think the first step is going to be what I said before, which is the foundational understanding of who you are as a Black person. Knowing that history and knowing where we come from, I think will help with the self-esteem and the personal morale that each of our kids have. And that will help them to understand that they don't need to buy name brand things to validate who they are or validate their worth. That will help them to understand that they don't need to do things for the gram because they know who they are. They're learning who they are. And so I think that will be the first step. The second step would be to, like Pastor Miller said, the education. Having those financial advisors and those financial people work with the community, work at the churches, work at the community centers, giving time at these homes like Mr. Davis was talking about to educate not only our kids but also their parents on what to do. If you, but some people's issue is not that they're not making the money, their issue is that they don't know what to do with the money or they're wasting the money. And so I think educating them on financial literacy on, okay, if your issue is not making the money, but what to do with the money, well, this is because that some kids in different situations, not our kids necessarily, they get that education at home because they are growing up in the generational wealth. And the way that they keep that going is by educating their kids on finances really early so that they don't squander the money that they're getting, that they're inheriting, that they were born into. And so although that may not be our situation, we are of a generation that are making better salaries and making money, and so we need to know what to do with that money to begin to generate that generational wealth. And then lobbying for laws for people to earn more money, whether it be teachers, whether it be women, whether it be um, having certain laws that are currently in place inhibiting people, black men who have served time, that those laws that are inhibiting them from earning money because of their past. If we're truly saying that they have served their time and they have paid their dues, then there should not be laws in place to keep them from getting certain jobs or being denied an opportunity because they have paid their due to society. So lobbying for laws to be either reduced or eliminated so that they can, you know, be able to create the salaries that or earn the salaries that they can earn to help support their families and earn this money that they can then learn how to manage with the financial literacy. I do believe that financial literacy needs to be a requirement in our school systems. It's and it goes back to the comment that was made earlier. Like it's on purpose that this isn't part of what our kids are learning in the school system. It is for a reason that that's not part of the curriculum because it's not rocket science that is important for our kids to learn. So lobbying for laws to have that being implemented as a requirement in our school systems and a requirement in our colleges as well. Those are my suggestions.
Dr. Johnson.
Um, Actually, I wrote it. I wrote some things down. Um, in terms of economics, I think the one thing as a community we should do, and there are five things, of course, we need to reintroduce financial literacy. Even when I was growing up, of economics and accounting and financial literacy was not taught to us when I was in high school or when I went to college, when I went to Florida A&M University. The hardest class for me to pass was economics because I was never ever introduced to that concept. So
Mhm.
with us as a community never being introduced to that concept, we have become basically consumers. So we were taught, whether through social media, through media, or whatever the case may be, to spend, 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 but never to save, save, save. So I think reintroducing financial literacy into schools or to churches or at home or any other safe space is very vital, not just to children, but to adults as well. Again, that goes back to the question of why we don't have a Black Wall Street. It's just the fact that we have all of these resources, but we're not taught to operate it in a communalistic manner. Instead, we are all about ourselves, thinking individualistically, or we're thinking in terms of just clicks via the haves and the have-nots. So I think reintroducing financial literacy is very important. Also, let's see. Basically use history to show how it worked in the past. I'm sorry, my handwriting is bad, but show how it worked in the past. You know, a lot of my students will say, "Well, Dr. Johnson, you know what you're saying is fine and good, but cite textual evidence." So I will have to go into history and show them, look, this has worked in the past. So if we can bring it to the present, we can build it towards the future. And I know, being a teacher for 20 years, that once kids see that an idea actually, they will attain it for themselves, you know, through force of habit. Thirdly, um, you know, I think I mentioned this earlier, but recruit, you know, experienced financial planners or successful people, and write off the ones who are doubters. Because some people will say, okay, we have no problem teaching debits versus liabilities, versus other saying, well, the money's mine. Why should I share it? Your own. And one thing I always heard about our people is that, you know, we don't know who to recruit versus who we need to write off. You know, it's not our job to save everybody. It's like the classic burning building analogy. If a house is burning and you letting people know that the house is burning, some people are going to run quickly, some are going to question it, some is not going to care. You can't save them all, but there are who are very interested on how to make money. You know, a lot of kids be Jay-Z. A lot of kids, you know, want to be Jeff Bezos, but they don't know how. And, you know, and then they watch, you know, TV and they see how they make it in the streets, or how to make it in the corporate world. But they don't know how to make it in terms of holistic, you know, building for the future in terms of their families. So recruiting experienced people who really want to genuinely help in our communities is another solution. Um,
Look,
Number four, um, I think in terms of education, uh, okay, let's see. Uh, I'm sorry, my handwriting is awful. But we also, like, what I do is I try to explain to my students there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich, I will tell them, that's basically just telling you how much money you're going to spend. That's all they see on rap videos or whatever. But wealthy is how much money you can save. And I always tell them, you know, my goal in life is to become wealthy. You know, I want to be judged on the money that I have invested and has saved for my family and my family's family versus the material things I can get for them now. Because I know I'm not going to be here forever and I can't take it with me. So those are things that we can educate them as well. And lastly, we have to stop the thought of white people can make money and build generational wealth. People of color can do it, but we can't. And one of my favorite black entrepreneurs in hip hop was Damon Dash. Um, and Damon, no, of course, for those who don't know, he used to work with Jay Z before Jay Z went and did Jay Z things and being successful himself. Damon Dash is very successful in his own work against Jay Z, and he made a point about how he talked to executives within the industry on how they can make all of this money off of hip hop, while the hip hop artists are not really making the money they deserve. And they made a point of that in our community, as I mentioned earlier, we're all about give, 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 but not asking for anything in return. And if you are outside of our community, you know, it's a great business opportunity. So we're being exposed, exploited, and extorted. We're getting nothing in return. So re-educating ourselves to build financial literacy is the key to definitely building our future and getting back to that idea of the Black Wall Street.
Okay. Now, you know, when you talk about economics like we just did, now I want you to know how many people can honestly say that they're going to actually sit down, they're going to think about planning their life from a financial perspective from top to bottom, and you're going to actually find yourself an actual financial planner that's going to help you do that. How many people you think will actually do that?
Or you saying by raise a hand with us or in
Well,
general?
that's a question. Anybody can answer that question.
Oh, in general. That's gonna be a long shot, man. It's hard to get some people to come out to a stop the violence rally, much less talking about getting a financial planner. That's gonna be a very low percentage, in my opinion.
And I think also is that that's not the first thing.
Mhm.
We got to ask ourselves why we don't like each other.
Right.
Let's just start there. Because
Well,
if I can't sit next to Brother Davis and call him Brother Davis instead of saying that over there who think and
right.
all of that, then we ain't even going to get to financial literacy.
Okay, we got to think about deprogramming then. How can we go about deprogramming which was deprogrammed into us? I'm gonna jump back a little bit right fast, right? You know, during slavery, they fought the dark skin versus the light skin. They put up some real tough battles between us as a people. They
Mhm.
pitted us against one another. And now, what I do notice, I have a 2-year-old son. Well, he just turned 3, March the 4th. He has so many traits of mine. I have a 22-year-old. He has so many traits of mine. And I deal with other children, some that don't even know their fathers, that have the same traits. You know, and me and my dad, I wasn't raised, he didn't raise me, I wasn't around him, but I constantly heard I had his traits and I act just like my dad. So when you think about what they did during slavery, how they mentally brainwashed us and instilled fear in so many ways to pit us against one another, it's not something that we're just doing consciously. A lot of time it's subconscious actions that we're facing among our people. You know, they don't even understand, like, why I don't like this. You know, it's just
Mhm.
a natural instinct, something that's been embedded in them. And it's not in all of us, because some of us have broken that cycle. Some of us were strong enough, some of us were educated enough, some of us had enough will, some of us had support and cash that were in our lives that gave us that extra little bit to just pass through it. We had strong pastors or just people in our community that were awoke, as we call them. And they help us to fight against that which was instilled in us. I actually had to go through my own phase and enlightenment and coming around. I fought tooth and nail for certain things before I came more conscious of what was really going on. And my heart went out to my people when I look around and see that they don't even realize what they're doing half of the time. You know, if y'all can get what I mean when I say they don't know what they're doing, because people know what they're doing, but they don't know what they're doing.
Why
Uh,
you're doing it or where it's coming from. Mhm.
so, you know, we have to think about that. How can we deprogram that which was programmed into us that was just over years? This wasn't no 10-year thing. It wasn't a 20-year thing. This thing went on for 400 years.
Yeah.
So we got to start working in that direction. So, like, I agree with a lot that everyone said on this panel, but that's going to be one of our main things, is tapping back into our own people with understanding uh, of where we were when we were youth to now, the lack of understanding or being able to overcome certain situations with our emotions arise, erupt, and we ready to kill something, you know, when we were 17 or 20 or 22, you know, versus how you would act at 32 or 42 or 52. We've learned to control our emotions and how we act out. We're still the same person. We just learn how to control that. So we have to have that same understanding for our people when we go to them and try to implement some of these things that we've learned and how we overcame that which was set against us.
I also agree with Pastor Miller in what he said about that not being the first step. So yes, it will be a low number of people who might buy into financial planning, getting a financial planner, but that's because they may not have been educated on why that's important. So when we say financial literacy, we're not jumping to getting a financial planner. Financial literacy is like the basics of money management and what that means and what it looks like on various salaries, because it can be done on every salary. So understanding what that even means and why it's important. And once you get that, then you will understand the importance of having a financial planner, and then you will be more likely to want to do that. and get that and work with someone who will take you to the next level on that. But we have to have an understanding of why that is even important to do.
And if I can just jump on what Dr. Washington said, the literacy that we have to the well, let me change it. The question that we have to ask is why? Why do we need money? You know, do we need money? I teach this when I do counseling for premarital counseling. When we talk about finances, you know, we talk about how do you see money? Do you see money as an image maker, or do you see it as a wealth creator? And these are, I'm talking to folks that got expendable income, you know, young couples that are, you know, looking to be committed to one another. And so when you have that expendable income, you got to start there, you know. And what is expendable income? You know, so there's a lot of education that has to happen. But before we get there, we have to talk about corporate, you know, cooperative economics. You know, how is it that we're I think is it 3 trillion that we spend and none of it comes back to our community? But you look at the Asian community, their dollar turns in their community like 7, 8, 10 times. You know, and other communities, their money, because we don't have an infrastructure. You know, so there's multiple things that we need to discuss. And that's why I think, you know, it goes back again to what Dr. Washington said. We need that remnant. I'm church. So we need that remnant that will say, you know what, we see it, we understand it, we want to implement it, because we're an oral people. We're a visual people. We got to see it happening before we put anything into it. You know, so when a group of people get together and start buying up property and holding land because they went to the processor and found out that the freeway gonna come through this way in 6 years, so let's buy this land now, so that when they come to us, we can ask for top dollar that we can put back into community. See, it's those type of thoughts that a small group has to come together and think about and present it to the larger group, and then put a incubator system in place so that we can practice what we're talking about, come back, reevaluate, you know, tweak it, give the understanding, then go back out there and do it again. Because if we be honest, a lot of us went through that. You know, and how we got to where we got was because we were working within a small group. It wasn't the large masses. The masses didn't come until the small group started to grow. You know, and so we have to be comfortable with the small going to the large. Bible says, forsake not small beginnings. And so when we do that, then our thought process is 10 years, you know, but somebody else coming in at year 2, your process is still 8 years. It's not 12 years. You see what I'm saying? Everybody works for that 10-year goal. And then once we reach there, we celebrate. And then we start saying, okay, what does the next 10 look like? If we did that, we would be much further ahead.
I think it's also worth mentioning in the conversation surrounding economics are the different ways that Black folks have been taken advantage of. And I'm thinking of specifically the insurance system and how we invited people into our homes. We meaning my grandparents and their parents invited people into their homes to sit down and talk to them about insurance and how that was presented as a vehicle towards generational wealth, and how many of those insurance agents took advantage of our grandparents and their parents in that way. And they really just did that to earn money for themselves. And so I think that part of our financial literacy discussion has to include the space for people to explore the fact that that did happen, and a lot of our families were taken advantage of and lost a lot of money in those efforts, and how to why the education is important to protect ourselves from serpents like that. Nodding to you, Pastor Miller, to recognize when people are not as sincere or they're presenting things that are not quite right, so that we can protect the money that we have and we can recognize the correct vehicles that will lead us to that generational wealth that we're trying to get to, for our kids, to provide them with a better future.
Thank you for touching on that life insurance thing right there. That was something I wanted to touch on. I thought I missed it, but you hit it. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And so let's move over to justice. You know, justice is not one of those things that serve our community well at all. We know that's from police brutality, that's to being locked up in prison, that's to these many camps that they have, and we know, as was stated earlier, that they're using the schools in order to fill the jail. So when it comes to justice, how many of you are actually um, it's kind of hard for me to say this, but how many of you are actually trusting of the police and the justice system at all?
I don't have no faith in them at all. Not until they show me some changes. I've seen a lot. I'm actually in a position now where I'm like I don't work with them or for them, but I work so close to them, and I'm right up under like the leaders in the city, and I'm seeing a lot that's not being done. Um, I don't want to speak out of place too much right there, but I'm gonna just go back to saying I myself personally right now I don't trust them, and I'm in a position to be able to know if they can be trusted or not.
Well, I can tell you, I definitely don't trust them. I've never had a run-in with them, but from the things that I've seen and the people I know that have experienced some things that I know are just definitely not um, are not within the realms of what the law is supposed to be about. I'm seeing too much railroading. But the thing that bothers me more so about this is than anything is we actually have to pay tax dollars that pay their salaries, which means we have to pay them to kill us, to beat us, to destroy us, and to make us just be this lower than a piece of dirt. And they actually feel like it's okay, and we're supposed to be accepting to this brutality? Are we supposed to be accepting to those that have to go to court before a judge, and the judge has already made up his or her mind about this individual because of the color of his or her skin? So, in looking at that, and they say justice is blind, believe me, she is definitely not blind. She's not blind. So, like, she have that little thing on her face. It's like it's off. She's sitting there and she is looking. She said, "Yep, there's another black one." But I mean, I'm sorry for making a mockery of it like that. But what can we do about that?
Well, I think the short answer is, again, going back and educating our community on the purpose of justice, and understand that the first justice is just us.
Mm-hmm.
And if we would police ourselves, there would be no reason for the police to police us. If we were to go into our communities, when we were growing up, we knew who the bad actors were. We knew who the drug folks were. We knew who, we knew the ones that was kind of, on the end. We knew that because we were a community. And we didn't have to call the police on every little thing. And so again, it goes back to, why do we commit crime? Why? It's all about the why. Why do we jack cars? Why do we do drugs? Why do we put ourselves out on the street? Why do we feel like we got to have the biggest, the best, and the brightest? Why do we rob each other? It starts at home. if we could get let me say it this way, and I'll be quiet. When I was running my nonprofit, we had gangs in St. Paul. Okay, it's hard to believe that there were even black people in Minnesota, but there are black people in Minnesota. And we had gangs in our neighborhood. And I went to one of the brothers on the street and I said, hey, look, y'all got some expendable cash. If you let me help you invest that money, you don't have to put it in a shoebox and put it in your grandmama's house so that when you get raided, they're going to take your money and your grandmama too. I said, so let me get 10% of what you make and I'll invest it. If you promise me that in 2 years, if I make that investment work, you'll get out the game. See, because they can't get out if we don't have an alternative. So
Right.
I would have brothers be like, well, what's 10%? I had to educate them. But the point was, I had our own leaders in our community coming to me saying, why are you even offering that? They're gang members. They'll never change. See, if we don't see the change, then they won't see the change. The adults, if we don't see the possibility in the kids, they're not going to see a possibility in themselves. Now, granted, the idea never took off because there weren't too many people that were trusting, but it's just thinking outside the box. Mm-hmm. Our gang members and those who are affiliated, they can be our guards in the community if we educate them. If we educate them, say you don't have to sell drugs. If you want to be a bad drug dealer, sell drugs in the white community and see what happens. But we have to not tolerate it in our own community. See, we have to create the justice that works for just us. That's right. And then we go out and then try to change the system because, again, that system was created back in slavery. That the police were to keep the slaves in place. And once we got free, then they gave them a badge and said, if they even spit on the road, we're going to put them back in so we can put them back in what? Slavery. See, when we understand our history, then we can see our history today. And then we don't even want to get involved with it. I'm like what Brother David said. I worked alongside the police for about 10 years. We had an organization called the God Squad. And there was a bunch of preachers that would go into the community when there was a homicide, and we were able to cross the tape because we understood both sides. And so for us to go in there and see what was really going on, we could go back to the community and say, okay, what you thought it wasn't this. And we were able to mediate a lot of issues. Why? Because we engaged the system, but we didn't ask the system to do a doggone thing for us.
Transparency.
Exactly. And that's what we got to get back to. It's not just one leader that we need anymore. We need a ship full of leaders called leadership. Hmm. And when we get to that, then we each one reach one to teach one to grab one more. And if we have a universal plan that can be implemented on a state, county, city, and community level, and we put in the work to make sure that it hits all points, that's when we will see transformation.
I've been an educator for over 10 years. And when I taught elementary and when I taught high school, I had real conversations with my students. Those quote unquote bad actors, I would pull them to the side and say, if you don't get this under control, you're going to end up in a situation where someone else is going to be controlling that behavior and you're not going to like the way that they control the behavior. Either it's going to be a peer of yours out on the street that are going to manage you in a way that you don't like, or when you get older, it's going to be the police and you're not going to like the way they manage you. And once you get into that system, it's no longer under your control to manage. I had the same conversation with my high school students, with their parents also. If you don't manage your own behavior, someone else is going to manage it in a way that you don't like. Parents, if you don't help your child to manage this behavior, you're going to release your authority to do that, because once the system gets involved, once they get involved in the system, you may not get them back. I even took time out of the regularly scheduled curriculum to show my high school students what it looks like if they didn't manage their own behavior and how that led them not to college but to jail. I mapped it out for them. I laid it all out. I'm like, this is what your behavior is. This is a trajectory you're putting yourself on. This is the time for you to manage yourself and have accountability for you and your behavior, because there will be a point, if you don't, to where someone else is going to manage it for you in a way that you don't like. So I totally agree with Pastor Miller. It starts with us, but it starts with us teaching our kids the accountability for their own behavior, and also giving them the tools to make a change, if that's something that they want to do. So not just saying it, but also giving them the tools that they need to do better and be better.
I said one of a two-part thing. We got to spread the importance of voting. I mean, the real importance of voting and who and when to vote. And I ain't talking about the presidential election. I'm talking about our councils right inside of our cities. And not only teaching or spreading awareness about the importance of voting, we got to find some of our youth, not one of our youth, but some of our youth, and create us a youth city council and mold our own youth into getting into these positions of power. So we'll have our own people that we know we can trust, that we build and created on our own, that we support through their childhood. A youth city council, and these young men and women will get to debate among each other. And that's not only going to teach them communication skills along the way, it may encourage other kids that's in their age to want to be a part of it going forward, to learn about the city and being on the city council. And then we can watch them children as they grow, and we can make sure we put them in position and put them in office, because it's going to take us, but it's not going to just happen like we're saying is overnight. It's a 10-year plan. Put that inside of that 10-year plan where we get these kids and we create us a youth city council where these young people come together and they talk about what they feel, and we as the adults take it back to the real city council and let them know what our children think. Let them know how our children feel, what they want to have a part of society as they become adults. You know what I'm saying? And let them play a part in the decision making that's going on in the direction of where our city is going. And then once we get them in there, we start getting more and more of our own people in position, those that we have molded and took the time out to educate and bring to the table. That's when we're going to see some real change. And I can see that fit inside of that 10-year plan that you all speak of.
I love that idea. That is great.
Am I back?
You're really talking about 2 voting cycles, or almost 4 voting cycles within that 10-year plan. You know, so by the time because the council, depending on the turnover with your city council, your county boards, and your governor, your state senators, congressmen, and all that, within that 10 years, you're going to be voting. And you can definitely be grooming someone in a good way. And I don't know if y'all follow the church stuff, but you could groom them in a good way to put them in office, and you can start by creating a mock council that will govern the community, and putting elders and make it multi-generational. And when something happens in the community, you don't take it to the police, you take it to the council.
Mm-hmm.
And they make the determination, and it could be restorative justice. You break into brother so-and-so's store, you're going to go and help him build it. We ain't going to take you to the jail unless you just need to go. And if you need to go, like we used to say, we will escort you. No problem. Real quick statement I want to say to here. When I don't know, y'all remember, y'all probably don't, but when there was a commercial that came out back in it's probably the 80s, 70s and 80s, it said, if you feel that you've been abused by someone in your home, please call 911. And my dad looked at me and said, if you ever think about calling 911, you better tell them to send 2 cars, one for you and one for me, because I'm still going to be your daddy.
Right, Mr. Aikens.
Yeah, I was here the whole time, but for some reason I was frozen, so I was on YouTube just typing in my comments about the 5 point plan and all that stuff. I have to move to another side of my office. That side apparently don't like Wi-Fi, and it just kept freezing me out. But yeah, I agree with everything that was said. Just we have to reset the high expectations for what our community is. I was often asked why I'm not in certain groups, and I was like, because I don't want to just go to a fancy gala and then just write scholarship checks. I
Okay.
feel like we need to be mobilizing and getting into positions to where if all 100 or 200 of us pull up to the block that's super hot, those four drug dealers and those four knuckleheads, they can't take us all out. And so
Mm.
we have to reset the norm. Uh, and it's going to take a lot of work because, as everybody spoke about it, we see a lot of individual leaders in our community and not collective leaders. And then that voter education here in Alameda County, I think when we just voted on the 5th, it was so sad to see the number of people voted based on who's in Alameda County. And
Right.
it's also interesting to hear the negative feedback about the electeds that are in office. But when you have the opportunity to vote them out, you don't. And then, like what the pastor was saying earlier, everybody that's in a leadership position that look like us is not standing for us. And so
Right.
some of our elders that are in local politics across the United States, they may have got in for a good reason, but they holding on to a seat instead of mentoring some of us youngsters that's on this panel to pass that baton and to teach them the behind the scenes ropes of what they didn't see and to expand that scope of work. So because we got the legs now to run the race and the bandwidth off, but also with political power comes a lot of fiscal opportunity too. And the financial literacy piece is very interesting. And I would love to see a correlational study based on black political wealth versus white political wealth and see what the white politicians are doing fiscally and what the black people are doing and see if there's any direct gaps to why maybe that's why some of our black electeds don't want to get out of office because they didn't take care of their financial extra legs to be able to go into the universities to teach, get all the books out, and actually take hold of that capital. So we definitely have to start passing the baton, and we definitely have to focus on financial literacy, and we have to set the high expectations for our community. I agree with everything that came out of everybody's mouth because I was also in youth city council for the high schools in Oakland when I was in high school.
Wow.
Well, they actually have a youth city council in Oakland.
Yeah, so we have all city council, the school district, so all the high schools have a representative, and then the Oakland City Council, they actually have a youth city council of a whole bunch of members from that represent the whole body of Oakland that goes to their once a month meeting and do some organizing planning. So
If you don't mind me asking, I got another question for him. How did they go about setting up that youth city council?
well,
Or we could just, matter of fact, if you can, just make sure me and him link up somehow so we can discuss that a little further.
yeah,
Okay.
and if y'all want to bring me down to Alabama like that program that y'all trying to create, that's how I started my nonprofit. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. But I like to get to talk to each one of y'all a little more in depth because everybody got a little something different to bring to the table, and I'm a community facilitator. I'm all about collaborating and connecting the dots, and putting people in place and together where we can have multiple resources. I could turn to you, you could turn to me, we could turn to her, and we can all stay connected with a need for one another. I encounter people all the time that need help, so I'll be able to just, resource them out to different people, and that's what I do.
That's called the remnant. It don't take a whole lot of people to make a big change.
Right.
Well, on the email strain, everybody's on the email.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Well, if it, you're in the
So y'all
text, we're on
mind if I
the
reach
text
out to
message
y'all
too.
now?
So
Y'all get an email now. Don't be like, who is this creep? Just me.
Yeah, and right. Like Pastor just said also everybody's on the text message as well.
Yeah, if you could just go on the text message and put your name where your number comes up, then everybody will get everybody's number.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Because I'd like to stay in touch with you. We're in Texas, so, and I don't say I'm retired. I just got a job that lets me do stuff I want to do. I ain't gonna retire till my boss called me home, and he ain't called yet. And if he did call, I didn't answer. I ain't ready to go.
Well, I'm down here in Mobile, Alabama. You know, we got a lot of catching up to do with every last one of y'all.
Yeah, we can turn Alabama and Mississippi around, boy. We be in hog heaven, as they say.
I'm trying to tell you now.
Well, the brother just won the opportunity to go for that Senate seat in Mississippi. So
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, closing. Do any of you want to give any final closing remarks or statements?
Well, just like everybody said, we got to make sure we hold everybody accountable and responsible. You know what I'm saying? Responsibility, accountability. Those are keys to us being successful. Even when we know those others who are not being accountable and responsible, when we hold ourselves accountable and responsible for our community and our youth, mainly our youth. You know, like some, I can't remember who said it, but we got to know that some people ain't gonna get to go. Some people just not gonna be able to board the ship. Some of them ain't gonna be able to get on the plane, and we're gonna have to keep moving forward without them. As long as we continue to take accountability, responsibility for ourselves and in our communities with our youth to be able to reconstruct our communities moving forward, so that we can change the narrative on the stereotypes that plague us as a race of people, then we're gonna be all right.
Yes,
and
sir.
I would just say manifest destiny and start getting back to old school. Get a piece of paper and write things down to help your brain really start putting those action plans into play. And then also just take a deep look in the mirror every day and actually look at yourself through your eyes. Don't just wash your face, and tell yourself who you want your best version of yourself to be, and just make those indirect corrections.
Anybody else?
Well, I just first of all like to thank everybody on the panel for listening to this old man. I think we have to appreciate those who still want to be in the fight, and talk to the generation to come to let them know that they did not invent the fight. That we've been in this fight for a long time, and it just evolves because we change every day. And so, if we can instill that into our young people, I think we'll be further ahead.
I would just like to say that I appreciate this platform and the conversation surrounding solutions. There have been so many conversations and discussion just on what the problems are, and that really doesn't always move us forward. So I appreciate everyone on the panel who are offering real solutions. I look forward to keeping in touch with all of you. And just thank you for the opportunity to have my voice heard in this space.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody that was here today. I think everybody has contributed tremendously. We didn't get a chance to cover all the topics that we originally discussed. But in this time frame, I think the job that was done was really excellent. For those that are out there looking and watching this program, I want to thank you for your time. I know 2 hours is a lot, but we still have a lot to go. And I think for each and every idea that was today, it's one that we can all take and we can move forward with. And I'm hoping that sometime down the line here, as this year progresses, that we're able to do a second one of these where we can cover the rest of the things that we originally wanted to discuss. And I thank each and every last one of you from the bottom of my heart, because I think in trying to give voice to the community, give it some service, and to be the faces that those people can actually look at, that that we see maybe not on a daily basis, but maybe recognized outside of this platform as we carry forward this year. It's going to be wonderful. And as this platform grows, I want each of you to know that there's never going to be a time that, whenever in need, if there's anything I can ever do to contribute to everything that's going to be prosperous, I'm here for that. And I will definitely try to do my best to make it as best as possible, because I think as this platform grows, people are going to catch on to America in Black and White. And America in Black and White is going to set America ablaze as this year goes on, because there's plenty of more things to talk about. There's much more things that we have to do to execute in order to make our communities and our lives much safer and better. And I want to thank each of you for spending this time here, and thank you all, and have a great evening.